to order. And members, just before we start, we had our fifth meeting earlier this morning, and I should have asked the members earlier if we do get to a round of questions where we're not going to be able to do the full round, if you provide me the flexibility to kind of truncate that, and so that everybody gets an opportunity, every party would have an opportunity in that last round. So I'm just looking to the members. Everybody's in agreement? Okay, terrific. Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Yes, but if you can warn us ahead of time when if our 5 minutes gets compressed to 4, and the other parties potentially to 2, can you just let us know that before we start?
Yeah, I will do that, Mr. McLean. And yeah, it's more when we have a hard stop is kind of when that would happen. So welcome to meeting number 6 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance, pursuant to the House of Commons Order of Reference adopted on December 2nd, 2021. The committee's meeting on Bill C2, an act to provide further support in response to COVID-19. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. The proceedings will be made available via House of Commons website. So you're aware the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. Today's meeting is also taking place in the webinar format. Webinars are for public committee meetings and are available only to members, their staff, and witnesses. Members enter immediately as active participants. All functionalities for the active participants remain the same. Staff will be non-active participants and can therefore only view the meeting in gallery view. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all participants to this meeting that screenshots or taking photos of your screen is not permitted. Given the ongoing pandemic situation in the light of the recommendations from the health authorities, as well as the directive of the Board of Internal Economy on October 19th, 2021, to remain healthy and safe, all those attending the meeting in person are to maintain a 2-meter physical distancing, must wear a non-medical mask when circulating in the room, and it's highly recommended that the mask be worn at all times, including when seated. Must maintain proper hand hygiene by using the provided hand sanitizer at the room entrance. As the chair, I'll be enforcing these measures for the duration of the meeting, and I'll thank members in advance for their cooperation. To ensure an orderly meeting, I'd like to outline a few rules. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either Floor, English, or French. If interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately and I will ensure interpretation is properly restored. Before resuming the proceedings, the raised hand feature at the bottom of the screen can be used at any time if you wish to speak or alert the chair. For members participating in person, proceed as you usually would when the whole committee is meeting in person in a committee room. Keep in mind the Board of Internal Economy's guidelines for mask use and health protocols. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. If you're on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the proceedings and verification officer. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you're not speaking, your mic should be on mute. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. With regards to a speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do our very best to maintain a consolidated order of speaking for all members, whether they are participating virtually or in person. To members and witnesses, when you have 30 seconds left in your questioning time, I'll signal you with this paper, just so you know. And now it's my pleasure to be able to introduce our witnesses. We have with us, as an individual, Stephen Sartsky, a real estate businessman. From the Hotel Association of Canada, we've got Susie Grenell. She's the President and Chief Executive Officer. And from Income Security Advocacy Center, Devra Kobluk. She's the Senior Policy Analyst. And from the Union des Artistes, we have Sophie Préjean.
From l'Union des Artistes, we have Sophie Préjean.
So witnesses, each of you will have each entity will have up to 5 minutes to make opening remarks. And do we have Mr. Sartsky here yet? Clerk? No. Okay, so we are going to start with the Hotel Association of Canada. Ms. Susie Grenell, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Merci pour l'invitation d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui.
Thank you for inviting me to be here with you today.
And I'm the President and CEO of the Hotel Association of Canada. I am also the founder and co-chair of the Coalition of the Hardest Hit Businesses, which represents over 120 different business associations in the tourism, hotel, and event sectors. COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on Canada's travel and hospitality sectors. It has hurt our businesses more than 9/11, SARS, and the Great Depression combined. The accommodation sector itself saw a 71% decline in revenue from April to November of 2020. Hotels located in Canada's major urban cores have been the hardest hit of the hardest hit, with occupancy rates averaging less than 17% over the last 9 months of 2020. Our sector has now lost the better part of 2 years of business, and we are at a breaking point. Government support to this date has been our lifeline, and I want to thank every member of this committee and your colleagues for working together to keep our sector alive. It's why we have an industry still standing here today. But without Bill C-2's Tourism and Hospitality Recovery Program for the coming winter and spring, there will be significant business failures and sizable job losses. As the rest of the economy recovers, the tourism industry continues to deal with variants, changing restrictions and capacity limits. Tourism remains the hardest hit, and it is not expected to recover to 2019 levels until 2025. Small family-run businesses make up 99% of the tourism sector in Canada. Many people assume that hotels are owned by the international recognized brand on that hotel, but the reverse is true. Those hotels in your ridings are, and you probably know who they are people in your riding that generally own those hotels. These are small business operators who have now spent all of their livelihoods and reserves trying to keep these assets afloat. They have taken on as much debt as they possibly can, and now they are on the brink of survival. Major festivals, concerts, Indigenous tourism experiences, and business events have been canceled. Events planned for 2022 are being reconsidered, and even immediate travel plans to Canada for Christmas or to come and ski over the winter are being called off due to new variants. Put simply, we are at a standstill. Perhaps the most heartbreaking fact of all is that tourism lost 880,000 workers in the first 2 months of the pandemic, and today we employ 350,000 fewer people than before the pandemic. With our slow recovery compared to the rest of the economy, most of these workers have now permanently left our sector. According to our survey of the Coalition of the Hardest Hit Businesses from June, 60% said they would go out of business without an extension of government relief programs through winter of 2022. Simply put, if Bill C-2 doesn't pass, we could lose the infrastructure that supports our events businesses in Canada, the unique local attractions that enhance our visitor experience, and the hotels and event spaces that anchor the travel sector. We are grateful that all parties offered support to our sector during the election campaign. Every party committed support to our sector. Bill C-2 accomplishes the key goal of providing support only to the hardest hit of the hardest hit businesses in order to keep them alive. This is an investment in a sector that will come back with a vengeance if given the opportunity. It will also help keep people in the workforce that would otherwise be laid off, many of whom are Canada's most vulnerable: women, young people, and immigrants. We are recommending the swift passage of this bill today without amendments. Tourism and accommodation businesses must have immediate access to liquidity to get through the winter. Passing Bill C-2 in its current form will save thousands of businesses and jobs. Travel will resume with a vengeance. Of this, we are certain. With the passage of this bill, we will have an industry still standing on the other side of this pandemic, and we cannot wait to welcome the world back to Canada. I urge all members of this committee to vote in favor of this bill and pass it without delay. Our survival depends on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grinnell, and right on time. Now we have Mr. Steven Sartsky as an individual.
Hey guys, yeah, I was sort of brought into the
Mr. Sartsky, if you can put your mic closer to your mouth, not too close, but at least, yep, go ahead. It might be your mic input volume, if you can look to increase that.
Can you hear me?
We cannot hear you very well, no.
How's
You
that?
know, how's it? Can
Is that
you?
better?
Yes, that is much better. Okay, if you can hold it there, and if you can provide your remarks, you'll have 5 minutes. If there is any other issue with your mic, we'll let you know. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can't speak, too specifically on the tourist sector, tourism segment. Obviously, you guys are still, facing with different variants and lockdowns and whatnot, and restrictions. So that's certainly impacting the travel sector. I mean, what I can speak to is I'm very, very active in the real estate space. So I'm speaking with people in the real estate space on a daily basis, tons of Canadians. That's kind of where I'd probably focus my attention. But I think that we're dealing with certainly, I think, some of the ramifications of the spending that's coming through. There's always knock-on effects, and I just think that we have to be cognizant of those knock-on effects, which I think that certainly we're seeing that showing up in the housing sector. National home prices running at 23% year over year. Back to back. So in 2020, we had record home sales. In 2021, we're going to have another year of record home sales. And so I think that what we're seeing is some of these sort of excesses are sort of sloshing around. So I think it's important to, obviously the bill, I think is certainly needed in the aspect that there are sectors or segments of the economy that need help, like the transportation and hospitality. But I think, like I said, I think it's just dialing in those flows and making sure that we're not overcompensating. I would say is my only real commentary, because I think that overcompensation, I think, is showing up in asset prices, and particularly in the housing market. And I think that there's a lot of I think there's certainly I think it's a crisis. I think it's a crisis right now in that segment. So that's kind of where I'd focus. I don't know if anyone has any particular questions on that aspect, but I'm certainly happy to comment on that further.
Okay. Mr. Sarsky, is that your opening statement?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sarsky. We are moving now to the Income Security Advocacy Center, and we've got Deborah Kobluk for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Can I first confirm that you can hear me well?
We can. I think so. I'll look around the room. Yes. Okay. Thumbs up.
Thank you. My name is Deborah Kobluk, and I'm Senior Policy Analyst at the Income Security Advocacy Center. ISAC is a specialty legal clinic funded by Legal Aid Ontario. Our mandate is to advance the rights and interests of low-income Ontarians with respect to income security and employment. We carry out our mandate through test case litigation, policy advocacy, community development, and public education. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to Bill C2. We are pleased to see an extension of the Canada Sickness and Caregiver benefits, but we have some concerns. First, the new Canada Worker Lockdown Benefit offers an inadequate rate of $300 per week and is inaccessible, since no region in Canada currently meets the lockdown requirement. Workers continue to experience the fallout from COVID-19, and this bill offers next to nothing moving forward. We recommend retroactively extending the Canada Recovery Benefit at its original $500 rate until the economy fully stabilizes and the impacts of the Omicron variant are clear. ISAC is also very concerned that there are no provisions in Bill C2 to address the ongoing crisis for low-income seniors. In early August, we were flooded with calls in the legal clinic system from seniors who had suddenly seen their GIS reduced or eliminated in 2021 because they accessed the CERB in 2020. The confusion and panic that began over 4 months ago has not subsided. The situation for these seniors is desperate. We understand that CERB was developed rapidly when the pandemic hit and that the goal was to get money out the door quickly. What we do not understand is why this bill does not seize the opportunity to correct unintended consequences of CERB GIS interactions. This government knew of these interactions as early as May 2020 and stated last month that there were issues of fairness and equity to consider before addressing concerns. What is fair and equitable about clawing back a poverty reduction tool, the GIS, during the unusual years of a pandemic? The seniors impacted are the poorest seniors in Canada. They supplement their below below poverty GIS income with part-time work to make ends meet. At an age when one hopes to not have to work, these seniors work. When the pandemic hit, like everyone else, they accessed CERB because of job losses and as a high-risk population to isolate and stay safe. They were not informed of possible consequences to their GIS. Further, a loss of GIS disproportionately impacts women, older seniors, Indigenous, and racialized seniors. At the end of July, these were the seniors who lost up to $600 of their monthly income, sometimes more, and with no warning. Among those impacted is a 68-year-old senior in Ottawa who worked as a self-employed dog walker prior to the pandemic. The pandemic caused her small business to completely collapse. She used CERB to supplement her lost income, pay for groceries, personal protective equipment, and taxis to medical appointments. The avalanche of unintended consequences has been devastating. She is now trying to survive on approximately $650 per month. Her rent has increased because her rent geared to income was recalculated while she received CERB. She may have to leave her home of over 14 years. She has lost her Trillium drug program benefit that helped her pay for medication, and she is being asked to wait until July 2022 for this situation to be corrected. She will not make it. Like other seniors in her position, with every passing month, it is becoming harder to pay for rent, for rising food prices, for transportation, and for medical supplies. The risk of homelessness increases. The minimal recourse available to individual seniors is confusing, slow, and offers no guarantees. A lawyer in our clinic system in Thunder Bay was told by Service Canada that there would be no reassessment for 2021. In another situation, a Toronto MP's office contacted both the CRA and Service Canada on behalf of a senior constituent, only to be told that nothing could be done. That senior was given a list of nearby food banks. We need a systemic solution. We now know that over 88,000 seniors are impacted. We know that the $438 million needed to fix this problem was already earmarked in the budget. This government can and must fix this problem for the most vulnerable seniors now. Isaac has reached out to several ministers and to the Prime Minister and received no response. We wrote an open letter at the end of October that was signed by 106 anti-poverty community and seniors advocacy organizations from across the country, asking that the government first exclude CERB from the calculation of income and recalculate the GIS benefits for 2020-21. And second, retroactively return the lost benefits and apply the readjusted benefit amount for the duration of the 2021-22 year. Today, I now urge the Standing Committee on Finance to amend Bill C2 to include these provisions and further to also include the CRB from calculation of income from the GIS so that this problem does not continue into 2023. Failure to do so only guarantees ongoing cruelty towards the country's poorest seniors. Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Kalbluk. Now we will be moving to the Union des Artistes, and we have Sophie Prejean. She's the president with us today for 5 minutes. Sophie.
Bonjour. Hello, Mr. Chair. Thank you for giving me this chance to talk to you about the agricultural sector in the Francophone Canadian world. What is the Union des Artistes? It was created in 1937, and it's an old union of which we're very proud. It's recognized by the government, representing actors, dancers, program moderators, and we have many active members at present, and this is obviously the art sector and not agricultural, who have been much affected by the pandemic since the month of March 2020. You know that the audiovisual sector has relatively quickly climbed out of the pit it fell into. Over 6 months, our members went through a great deal of difficulty, but the sector that has been most hit, and all associations and sectors will confirm this, is the stage arts sector, meaning dancers, actors, theater actors, stage actors, musicians, singers, lyric artists. All said, artists who are not in the audiovisual sector, not on TV, not on film, and not making advertisements. Most often, these are the members who receive less income, who probably have a lower revenue among their colleagues in the Union des Artistes. Just to give you an idea, prior to the pandemic, the audiovisual sector among our members counted for 53% of our members' income. At present, that's 67%. So quite different from artists on stage, stage artists. They now represent a higher proportion of the income overall of our members. So those who were theater artists are now doing even worse than they were before. Comparing this to 2019 and 2021, we're still at minus 53% of the usual level of operation for theater arts. So audiovisual is doing well, even better than it was before, because there are a number of new shows that are up and running now. But that is far from being the case for the theater arts. Even though theaters have reopened, they aren't having as many shows, and of course, the roles being offered are fewer. There are still few theater lovers attending in person. So the situation is as fragile and more fragile than it was prior to the pandemic. Let me now say something about the psychological distress this causes our members and beyond our membership. In March 2020, we studied the situation across 9 associations, culture associations, authors, musicians, television directors, dancers, singers, actors. 9 associations came together to carry out this investigation. And I don't want to give you too many figures. That wouldn't be very helpful, I'm sure. But let me just note 4 things here with you about artists in general, not simply our Union des Artistes. To begin with, 26,000 people were spoken to, were polled. 63% of those who responded said that they are experiencing high levels of psychological distress. 44.3% report symptoms of major depression. 41% of respondents felt and still feel that they should probably abandon their careers. And twice as many artists as before now need to keep at least 2 day jobs. Of course, we responded to the situation. Why? Because even though we don't contribute to employment insurance, we can't necessarily draw on that. And we need a new emergency measure, a relief fund, an emergency response that will be able to fill in for the loss of the SERP. Thank you, Ms. Préjean.
Members, we're moving into our question rounds now. We'll start with the first round. We will have the Conservatives, and it's Mr. McLean up for 6 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to hear more, and I'm glad that Ms. Grenal, first of all, thank you to all the witnesses today for your excellent presentations. But Ms. Grenal, you touched on it a little bit, but I think it requires some more explanation about how the actual cost structure of hotels is divided between the building owners, the building operators, and the franchisees and franchisors. So if you could explain that to us so you can show exactly where the costs are continuing, where the revenues are not flowing in this period, I think it would be instructive for this committee, please.
Be my pleasure. So in the hotel industry, the hotels that would be in all of your ridings, there's a misconception that the franchise, so this is a franchise model. So the brands that you might see on those hotels don't actually own those assets. So if that asset is generating revenue, they would take a percentage fee. So it's a service arrangement where they would take a percentage fee on top of what the asset would be making. There's no one's making money during COVID, so effectively those brands, those marketing, and it's really a marketing agreement. Those brands who sit above those assets are sort of stagnant. So then if you go down to the asset level and you're now looking at the people in your community who own those assets, you probably know a lot of them and who they are. They have invested their livelihood into the local hotel. They purchased that hotel, and that hotel it's a large asset. So over the course of COVID, they've had to keep the lights on. You can't just shut a hotel down. You need to have insurance. You need to keep the lights on. You need to have maintenance. You need to have a core set of employees. Fixed costs have been the single biggest challenge for these operators because there has not been enough money coming in the door over this 19-month sustained period to pay for these assets. So the CERB program, which didn't include hotels originally and did in the second iteration, has provided a percentage of support, still losses every month, but that's critical. And the other piece is obviously our employees, who are the lifeblood of this industry, and the wage subsidy program has been absolutely instrumental. But to be very clear, every single month, most of these properties are running a loss, which is why we are so deeply concerned about this winter period until the spring.
Thank you. And when you talk about fixed costs, can you illustrate for us which of those fixed costs would include something like municipal taxes?
Tax included in fixed costs. It's anything that you have to pay on an every month basis. So that's your tax, that's your insurance, that's your maintenance, that's your lights, that's your, if you are operating at a very low basis, that's your food that you have to bring in. It's the costs that are non-negotiable, your non-variable costs that you have to pay regardless of what is going on in the external environment.
And thank you. And just what I'm trying to arrive at here is municipal taxes don't go down just because your revenue goes down, because it's a fixed asset at the end of the day. So what percentage of your costs has that become?
Tax?
Municipal tax.
Municipal tax. I would have to come back to the committee with something more specific on that as a percentage of fixed costs, and I will do that following this
But
appointment.
Needless to say, if you had to go out of business, those municipal taxes would be zero for quite some time on that asset.
Yes, absolutely.
Good. Thank you very much.
The fixed costs also include mortgages.
Thank you. I'll move to Mr. Soretsky now. Mr. Soretsky, you talked about the overcompensation of real estate markets based on the government's stimulus measures. Can you extrapolate a little bit on that, please, and expand on what you mean and how much that's caused the overvaluation of real estate, the overpricing of real estate in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when you go through, typically recessions, right? I mean, I think at the onset of the pandemic, everyone's talking Great Depression, which is certainly nobody wants that. What ended up happening was, it was certainly rushed out the door and probably rightfully so. But in the second quarter of 2020, labor income declined by about 20 billion nationally. But at the same time, government transfers to households grew by over 70 billion, right? So we basically, there's $3 that went out the door for every $1 lost in income. And so what happens is you have a situation where typically again in a recession, for example, you'd see that decline in consumer demand, but that was kind of offset by government transfers, while businesses reacted by obviously shutting the doors, thinking the worst was coming. And so what you have is basically too much demand out there because it was supported by government households. And again, I'm not saying that's the wrong decision to make, but it's just it's now we're starting to see that obviously in consumer price. Inflation, consumer price inflation expectations right now in Canada are running at a 20-year high, and businesses are expecting, half of businesses next year are expecting to raise prices by 5%.
Sorry, Mr. Soretsky, I'm running out of time here, but your expertise is in real estate, so the inflation caused in real estate assets has been quite severe. What would you say if there's an extra $9 billion coming into the system? Would that inflate prices even further?
I mean, I think it definitely has the potential, right? I mean, I think for every action, there's a reaction. I think that we're seeing is the bulk of the credit creation is going into the housing market. You can see that consumer loan growth, residential mortgage loan growth is running at decade highs, 10-year highs.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Soretsky. We're now moving over to the Liberals and Ms. Zarowitz for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to say genuine thanks to all of our presenters for their presentations and for their introductions today. I'm going to start off with Ms. Greinel. Ms. Greinel, nice to see you. Thanks for coming back. You've been a very reliable witness and a very big champion, I think, for those industries that have been hardest hit. And I just want to reiterate that you're wearing two hats. One is that you're representing the Hotel Association of Canada, and also you're representing a consortium of those sort of organizations and businesses that are also the hardest hits. Do I understand that correctly?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So with your hat on in terms of the Hotel Association of Canada, my first question to you is, I know you've talked a little bit about how you're quite anxious to see this bill get through as soon as possible. If we were to delay the passing of this bill until after Christmas, could you elaborate a little bit more clearly about what the impact would be to your hotel stakeholders if we waited to implement this bill?
Sure. The survey that we have done, both of the hotel industry and the coalition of the hardest hit businesses, revealed a very similar result. In our case, it was 70% of hotels would go out of business in this country permanently if there was not more support. And that was prior to this program being introduced. If this bill doesn't pass, there will be a disruption in the subsidy rates that are in the subsidy applications. And so at the end of this month, operators will go to access the subsidies that I just discussed in the previous question to cover those fixed costs, and they will not be available to them. And we don't know how long it will take by the time the House comes back in January to be able to look at this bill. Like, are there going to be amendments? It could be anywhere up from 1 to 4 months. And if that happens, we will see a collapse in the sector. We will see significant business failures. If there is an interruption of the subsidies that are the lifeline for this sector today.
Thank you for that. And then you talked a little bit about the workers within the hotel industry. Can you explain a little bit more about who are those workers, and again, how they will be impacted if this bill does not pass before Christmas?
Our workers are the lifeblood of this industry. And to be clear, we have lost a lot of workers and they have permanently moved on to other sectors. But we have maintained as many as we possibly could through the generous support of the government with the wage subsidy program. Those workers' jobs are absolutely in peril. If there are no businesses, there are no jobs. And so we are desperately trying to keep the businesses afloat and desperately trying to keep as many of our long-standing employees whose hearts are in hospitality, who have spent their life building the skills and experiences they have. And here I'm talking at all levels, so senior levels right down to, we are the industry of first, Canadian jobbers and new Canadians and immigrants. Most of Canada's vulnerable workers are employed in the tourism and hospitality sectors. They are who is at risk here, and we are desperately trying to keep them employed.
Perfect. That's very helpful. And then in terms of your hat for the hardest hit industries, in terms of the hard hit business recovery program, if you actually go through the legislation, there's actually quite a substantial list about which organizations and the type of activities they would that they offer that would be eligible for this recovery program. Do you agree with the list that has been created, and were you consulted in the process?
Yes, we were consulted in the process. We've been working very closely with government and with officials on the creation of that list. Ultimately, it's the government decisions of who gets in there. We felt that list was generous at the end of the day, and we have no concerns on who is included in that list at this stage.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then maybe one other question. One of the key aspects as well of the legislation is the enhancement and extension of the Canada Recovery Hiring Program. And is that a program that is helpful, whether it's within the Hotel Association sector or whether it's within the hardest hit business recovery program? How important is that program, and is it helpful that we are enhancing it and extending it?
It is helpful, but I will say that the timing is a little bit misaligned with where we are today. That program will be more helpful to us in the spring. And we do hope that the government will consider extending that program into the spring when we are hiring people back. We're in our off season today. So we're trying to maintain as many workers as we can, but there's not enough demand today to hire back all of our workers that we would have in the spring summer period. So it is an important program. It's hugely important for sectors of the economy that are in a hiring in a hiring phase at the moment. But that's not where we are today.
And so I just want to point out to you, because I think your comment is very important. The program would be extended through to May 7th, 2022. So that's the spring has begun, and we have the authority, if the legislation passes, to extend the regulation until July 2nd. So I do think that it would meet the criteria as you're indicating right now. Thank you so much for that.
My pleasure. And we do hope for that extension. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are moving now to the block. And Monsieur Lemire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. It is an honor for me to be able to ask a question to Ms. Sophie Préjean from l'Union des Artistes. I had the opportunity to work with her in the legal clinic Judy Pop, and I'd like to underscore what she said about sexual violence and victims. She played a leadership role, an essential role in our society, and it is really quite the pleasure for me to speak with her again today. Unfortunately, again, it's in a context where the situation for artists and performers is critical. So thank you again for your presence here. Now, question, if nothing happens with C2, what would be the consequences for the cultural milieu? We know that people are hesitate to buy tickets for performances. So why do you think that the culture is not included in this right now? It's difficult for me to answer that question right now because I can't talk about other sectors. I can't talk about autonomous workers and freelancers in general. I can only tell you about freelancers who are part of the culture sector. What we have to understand is that the performing arts, that's the incubator of culture. It's the incubator of the future. Young artists who don't do any audio visual, who don't do TV, cinema, ads, those are the people affected. And that is where one's career begins. Your career begins in theaters, in the streets. You're there creating content. You're there making your own job, creating your own job until somebody takes a chance with you, until somebody hires you. And that's why I speak of an incubator here. These incubators usually launch people's careers on the Francophone scenes. And it's the same for musicians, theater, TV. And since there's no money right now, musicians are doing that work on the side. They no longer use that to make money. So what's going to happen when there's no longer a penny to make in that area? There won't be any artists coming up after that. I worry about people who have trouble making a living, but mostly I worry about the culture of our future, the culture that we are preparing right now and the culture that will be absent from our future. There will be no culture in 10 years because those people will have decided to do something else in order to make a living. So is it just going to become something you do on the side, a hobby, or do we consider culture to be something important for Canada? Is it important enough for us to help it and to respect that area? Yes, because you spoke quite eloquently about how people have two jobs just to keep going. You've spoken about the mental health issues, expertise that will be lost. The finance minister has committed to working in order to have a program develop in a acceptable timeline. How would that work for you? What's an acceptable timeline for you, especially since a CRB is over, after CRB? Well, the new measures would have had to be applied immediately. So I worry about the gap right now. I know there's no support, and that's why people are leaving the sector. It's an exodus. People need to make money. People have to pay rent, have to feed their children, so they're going elsewhere. There's an exodus. I can't give you a specific date or a timeline, unfortunately, but if I had to give you a date, I'd say yesterday. But if I'm trying to be optimist, I'll just say that the sooner the better, really. And this is urgent. I don't know what else to say. There's no specific timeline here. Ideally, what we would need is something a bit permanent, a little bit like EI, something for freelancers in the cultural sector. I know that it's very difficult to implement from a technical standpoint. But in the meantime, we need something there. We can't just have a gap. Something needs to be done because the repercussions are going to be profound and they will be felt in the long term. The government of Quebec, amongst other measures, worked through the Fondation des Artistes, a foundation for artists, and established a fund, a very reactive fund, in order to spend money quickly. 2,300 requests came into this program. So do you think it might be an acceptable way for the federal government to work through this provincial fund? I've been saying since the beginning that since this fund already exists, since this fund has done this before, it works, it's been tested, and there is accountability with the Fondation des Artistes. This foundation has existed for 35 years now, and $5 million has already gone through this foundation, and it's a subsidy here. It's not a donation, it's a subsidy. So it's not a donation to our members. It's money for all members, because the mission of the foundation is to help artists, is to help the sector, not the Union des Artistes. So I think that, yes, this is a rapid and efficient measure, and it could fill this gap. Yes, again, we still need a permanent measure, but in the meantime, I think that this is the best way to move quickly, to change things quickly. And right, it is an urgent situation for this industry. So thank you very much, Ms. Préjean. Thank you.
The NDP and Mr. Blakey for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much. Ms. Koblik, I just want to thank you for kind of putting an emphasis on just the sense of urgency that there is to try and settle the question of these benefit clawbacks that are happening, not only with the GIS, but we're learning as time goes on, are happening with other income-tested benefits like the Canada Child Benefit and the Canada Worker Benefit as well. The government has been saying for some time now that they're working on a solution. They haven't actually announced anything yet. Provided that they are getting close, they keep saying they're close, but don't actually get a solution announced. I just wonder if you could provide a sense of, when you talk about a systemic solution, I know for a while the government had been talking about people applying on a case-by-case basis for a reevaluation of their income for the next year's projected income. But I'm wondering, if there is going to be a systemic solution, to what extent should the onus be on the individuals affected to make an application of some kind in order to have their case reassessed? Or does a systemic solution mean that the department should be conducting these reassessments for income-tested benefits and contacting affected people and letting them know that they've been reassessed and can expect to have their benefit restored?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And the minister said it this morning in committee. I think it has to be on the onus of the government. I work with lawyers. They've looked at the avenues available. What we see is if they applied through the CRA, the appeal mechanism is ultimately through income tax court, which requires a tremendous amount of resources, which no senior who's already living on poverty line is going to access. If they went through Service Canada, like I said, one person was said, we're not getting clear directives even when people call in. It's confusing, and it'll take a long time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. So this has to come from the government. And the other thing I just want to say is, even though we've heard from many seniors, these are the seniors that make it to legal aid. There are a whole ton of seniors that we are not learning about and don't even know that they might have a right to appeal. So I think it's the government. The government's known about this for over a year, and they should be using this. They should be using what they can, what mechanisms they can to alleviate poverty, which is what the GIS is meant to do.
Thank you. I want to touch on another pressure point for a lot of folks who are living below the poverty line, which is the demands for repayment of the CERB from folks who, you know, had applied because they were told, hey, if you need help, do this, you're not going to be punished. I had raised earlier today the example of kids in Manitoba who had graduated out of foster care during the pandemic, but there are people from many walks of life who were already in poverty, who were pushed toward the CERB by government members in some cases. And I'm just wondering if you can speak to the impact that that's having, and also how much revenue the government could realistically expect to get by putting the heat on these folks who are already in financial distress.
Yeah, thank you for that. So Isaac has also supported the CERB Amnesty campaign, and there's many situations across the country, but the one that we are most familiar with is social assistance recipients who are actually advised by their caseworkers in the legislation. You have to seek all forms of income support possible. Some of them, if you're on $700 a month, if that's your paycheck, $733 a month, and you are now being told that you have to pay back $14,000. And I think what we're hearing from the government is, we'll do flexible repayment plans. I mean, do the math on that. How many years, and I mean years, is this person going to be paying $50 a month, which when you live on so little is the difference between groceries right now and not having groceries. So I don't know where they're going to, my mother would say, getting blood out of a stone, right? That $50 means more to them than I think the government means. And these were not ill-intentioned people. This is not the fraudsters, right? These are people just getting by, and we've seen the rising costs. And I also want to say, whenever you're dealing with low-income people, whenever things are shuttered because of lockdowns, those free services are gone. And so they need extra money, where the drop-in centers, transit, they may not have been able to get on because of if they have a disability and they were at risk. So this is part of the increased cost of the pandemic that I think we're maybe forgetting and normalizing already.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned the question of fraud, because it's obviously come up here a lot. And in respect of the CERB, I mean, we know that there were fraudsters who are reported to have gone into seniors' buildings, told people that they were eligible when they weren't, and that they would facilitate access to the benefit in exchange for a cut of what they were receiving. I mean, not all of the fraud is by individuals who received all of the money. In some cases, they were people whose identities were stolen by fraudsters. Yeah. So, I mean, I wonder if you just want to speak a little bit to the nature of the CERB fraud that we should really be concerned about, and who we should be going after, and who we need to recognize are victims of fraud that's being compounded by the government chasing this debt.
So I like what you've just described to me as elder abuse, right? And it feeds off the confusion of a senior. And so I think, like, what we have to remember is this was a confusing, unclear process from the government. The CERB changed many times. And I think that you shouldn't be assuming, the government should not be assuming that such people who were confused and were just trying to make it are going to be the fraudsters.
Thank you, Ms. Kolbluck. Thank you. Thank you. That's the time. So we are moving into our second round, members, and we have the Conservatives with Mr. Polyev for 5 minutes.
Mr. Stewart, please. Mr. Stewart,
Oh,
please.
Mr. Stewart, sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First question is to the Hotel Association of Canada. In my riding, Miramichi Grand Lake and the greater region, we are well known for our hospitality. I myself come from the salmon fishing hospitality world, so I got a great appreciation for the work that you do. I'd say that our East Coast hospitality is known around the world, but in saying that, I'm hearing from your members they were being negatively impacted by the CERB program. I've heard from countless people that operate hotels that they can't find people to work. The jobs I hear most frequently are housekeepers, banquet staff, and front desk. I mean, obviously, if you can't travel, or if you're not permitted to travel, or if there's a fear of traveling, I understand how hard the hotel industry has been hit. That's only common sense considering the global pandemic. But can you tell me how the program negatively impacted your ability to hire staff and retain staff and recruit staff?
Sure. Thank you for the question. The labor challenges that our sector has faced even before the pandemic were reaching the point of crisis, and this is because demand for Canada and in regions like yours, I mean, Canada has become one of the top desired places in the world to visit. So we were already struggling to find enough workers. There is a global phenomenon here where there's not enough workers to support our economy and into the recovery. That was exacerbated during COVID. And, we have been struggling to keep our doors open. But we did see in some regions like yours, some domestic recovery this summer. And the calls that I got all summer long was that we couldn't find enough workers. People don't want to come back. And I will say that one of the issues that was voiced to me on countless occasions is that the CERB program was encouraging people to stay home as opposed to coming back to work. Now, I do appreciate that the CERB program was important and critical for a lot of individuals, including some of the witnesses' conversations here today. But it certainly did impact our ability to attract workers back this summer.
I appreciate that, and that's kind of what we were learning locally as well. And I mean, one of the loopholes we've seen in the bill, I mean, any bill that any government's putting forth, that they're not always bulletproof, but one of the loopholes we've seen this week was the paid sick leave and how you don't need doctor's notes, and it's kind of loosey-goosey. Anybody could say they're sick and achieve the benefits, which would again be another hindrance to the Hotel Association. And of course, the industry can't fill the previously mentioned positions sometimes because a large amount of hotels are turning to the Temporary Foreign Workers Program only to find out that Citizen and Immigration can't process these files in a reasonable time frame, considering the well-known crisis that you already alluded to that exists in your industry. So I just wanted to verify that because I understand about how the pandemic must have affected the hotel industry overall in Canada. I appreciate your answer, and I have one question now for Mr. Soretsky. Just hold on a second. Yeah. Now, since we heard that Canada's real estate has gone up so much, the Canadian public is basically all but expected at this point, although not the best practice, to remortgage their homes and use that equity to pay for food, gas, and utilities in an already unaffordable Canada due to inflation and Liberal mismanagement. But to turn around and give the businesses money to pay their bills, I'm questioning why can't the business take the equity out of their buildings and pay the bills like the rest of Canada has to do in this climate?
I can't speak too specifically on the businesses, but I think if you look at, where the banks are lending money, where the credit growth is, it's all in the residential mortgage space. So like I said, residential mortgage credit growth is running at 10-year highs, and that's obviously inflating house prices. And if you look at business credit growth, it's basically stagnant. So I think that maybe the banks are looking at it and saying there's risk there in terms of, refinancing a business for them to then, go out and spend on CapEx, for example, right? So I think it's probably just a risk thing for the banks.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stewart. We're moving now to the Liberals for 5 minutes. Mr. Baker, you have the floor.
Thanks so much, and thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. I just before asking my question, I just wanted to sort of continue on the subject that Mr. Stewart was just asking about, and I think it's important also to remember, for broader context, that and I think this was mentioned in the response to his question, that the labor challenges existed before the COVID pandemic began. For a range of reasons, and these presumably vary in different parts of the country and for different providers in the tourism sector. But and that one of the key challenges, based on the reading that I've done, based on the economists that I've read from, and also what I've heard from my constituents in Etobicoke Centre, who run businesses, is that the labor shortage is to a great degree driven by the fact that during the pandemic we had very little immigration, and so. And that's affected the labor force, not just in tourism, but across all sectors. So I think that's really important to remember. But I also think it's important to remember that in C2, which is what we're here to discuss, that and the finance minister spoke about it this morning. That this is a pivot, right? And the pivot is designed to really provide targeted support for those enterprises and those individuals who need it most. And that's sort of the one of the key reasons for that pivot. So I'd like to ask the question to the Tourism Association about when you look back at if the government hadn't put in place the previous support programs, like the emergency wage subsidy, what would have happened? And I apologize, not the Tourism Association, the Hotel Association.
We simply wouldn't have an industry standing today. We would have lost the anchor businesses in this sector. I'm talking about the hotels, the convention centers, the attractions. We would have lost hundreds of thousands of tourism operators who provide those Canadian experiences, not to mention the Indigenous experiences that we have across this country. We would have lost significant infrastructure in the travel infrastructure space. So, fleets of RVs and buses that are going back and forth, and, our air sector, we would have had a collapse had it not been for the support. And the reason C2 is so important is because we are still on that brink of collapse in our off season with growing travel restrictions around us. So, our goal here is to preserve the core anchor businesses within this sector so that we have the infrastructure standing on the other side to allow the sectors to build back.
Thank you for that. Chair, how much time do I have?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. So there are some MPs, I think some on this committee, who have suggested that maybe it's time for COVID supports to come to an end. How would your members respond to that? How do you feel about that, and how would your members respond to that?
Well, I think if you look at the economy as a whole, there are sectors of the economy that are building back. And so, I think when the government in the budget looked at when do we wind these support programs down, there was some logic to doing it at the end of the summer or beginning of the summer, and then it was extended because the government can't be in a position where it's making every sector of the economy whole again. I mean, this has just been too deep a devastating pandemic for that to happen. But there are some sectors like ours who have suffered disproportionately as a result of this pandemic and who have not had one single opportunity to recover over these last 19 months. And we're not out of it because now we're in our off season, and our recovery, we think, is going to start in the spring of this year as we build towards the summer. So there does need to be some consideration in government policy response for those hardest hit sectors who, we were booming before the pandemic. This is an industry that, we're not hurting because there's been some sort of a shift in human behavior. If anything, travel is going to come back with a vengeance. We have so much demand on the books. People want to come back and get, married every day of the week, international conventions. The phones are ringing, but we're not in a position to welcome people back to Canada yet today.
Yeah,
and so we want to have this sector alive on the other side of this, and that is precisely what this bill will do.
Thank you so much for that, and I love your enthusiasm, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. And now we're moving to the bloc, and Monsieur Lemire.
Now to the bloc.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je vais...
Thank you, Chair. I will continue with Ms. Préjean. As you know, this is the 9th of December, very close to the winter holidays. We'll be in them in a couple of weeks. I would like to know a bit more about timing. Compared to last year, there were assistance programs which might have been of a more general nature, but that artists, stage artists as inclusive, could access. And is the psychological distress now, sadness, melancholy that you observe, is that even more pronounced as we approach the holidays? Well, recent news is not good. Their situation is becoming more and more urgent. The problem is obviously very deep. Right now, it's even difficult to get in touch with many of our members. As you know,
closer to your mouth.
Pardon?
Yes.
Comme ça?
Is that better?
Est-ce que c'est mieux?
Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Désolée.
so sorry. Thank you. I had moved. I'm sorry. Right now, it seems difficult to reach many members to really know what's going on. Please keep in mind that in careers that have ups and downs, they're always sort of dancing across the situation, just trying to survive. Many artists, as you know, members of the Union des Artistes, do have an RRSP. Producers do put money into their RRSPs, and so do artists. We have never seen as many requests as we are now for withdrawal of our RSP money, meaning that when these people are in their 60s and need their RSPs, there'll be nothing left in them. The only way they've been able to get their hands on any money is by cashing in their RSPs in their totality or in part. So ask yourselves what that's like. You probably have some way at present to continue contributing to your pension fund, your RSP. Now imagine that your situation were such that you were forced to pull money from that RSP at the age of 40, 52, 24, whatever. This is not the sort of thing that we observed among our members before, but our members must find answers. Now, something that we used to see a couple of times a year is now happening several times every time we meet, hearing that there are people doing this. Yes, it is indeed very distressing to hear that an RSP is becoming a social survival net.
Thank you. Ms. Koblik, one of the things we've heard from the government is that Bill C-2 is about, really kind of moving into the recovery phase of the pandemic. And one of the other things that we heard often from the government, not just recently, but particularly during the election campaign, which was before they had announced that they were going to be summarily ending the CRB program in October, is that they're committed to not leaving anyone behind. But we're seeing a recovery where financially vulnerable people are seeing benefits clawed back. There isn't ongoing income support for a lot of people who are still struggling in an economy that isn't easy in light of the pandemic. There are people who are being pursued, again, who are financially vulnerable, being pursued to repay debts. And then we see on the wage subsidy side, there have been companies like Bell, TELUS, Chartwell that received huge amounts of public subsidy and then paid out large dividends to their shareholders, and then even increased the annual amount of their payouts by anywhere from 5, 6, 7%. I'm just wondering, at a higher level, when we talk about the principles of the recovery, what it means not to leave people behind, and to make sure that we have a fair recovery and that we're building back better. Does C2 represent moving in that direction, or does it paint a very different picture of what the Canadian recovery is going to look like?
So I think C2 is optimistic and maybe unfairly so. So let's just think about who needs what, right? So October 23rd, the Canada Recovery Benefit ends. And that same day, almost 1 million workers qualified for the Canada Recovery Benefit. We know I was speaking to some of our workers' rights allies yesterday, and they mentioned that over 600,000 workers are forced to part-time work, right? So they actually aren't getting by. They're not. Their bank accounts are not recovered yet. So they're not. They're being left behind, and with every month it gets worse. And that's also what we're seeing with seniors: is every month it gets worse. So if we look at the fact that these people have lost their GIS now, it's going to be 5 months if they don't change this, right? That's 15% of their yearly income gone that they are being asked to continue to lose. And I think if we can think that some seniors in the first month may have had some very small savings, and people in deep poverty often don't.
Thank you. And we're moving now to the Conservatives. We have Mr. Chambers for 5 minutes.
Sorry about that. I will take in this round if you don't mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Polyev?
Yes, my question is for Ms. Greinel from the Hotel Association. And the question is, would you support splitting the bill to adopt more quickly the assistance for the hotel and hospitality sectors while we scrutinize some of the other income support programs separately?
Well, that's a great question. I would support whatever it takes to ensure that the tourism and hospitality recovery program can pass without delay before Christmas.
The Conservatives have moved for a split of the bill, and it is something that we're on the record procedurally as favoring. My next question is for Mr. Saretsky. You work in real estate. You know, the CMHC, the largest and most powerful government housing agency in the country, predicted that COVID would bring a 10 to 14% drop in housing prices, and it made sense. No immigration, wages dropped, people were frightened, they didn't know what their future was, and they're not even allowed to go and visit the houses that they're considering purchasing. But yet, after a brief drop, housing prices actually rocketed up a third since COVID began. To what do you attribute that sudden explosion of house prices that began in spring 2020 and continues to this day?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I think first off, part of it is certainly psychological, in the fact that, people working from home is obviously a greater demand to increase your living space. But I think the other thing is we have to look at is ultimately, in order to make that purchase, you need money and you need access to credit. And I think what happened was, as much as government was trying to help, I think there was an argument to be made that we perhaps overstimulated, and that overstimulation is showing up in house prices. So, like I said, if you look at, money supply growth, it's up 20%. You look at residential mortgage credit growth, that's where the banks have been lending their money. And obviously today, I mean, you can still pick up a variable rate mortgage at 1.3%, with inflation now running, north of 5%, or basically at 5%. So, you're looking at a real mortgage rate of, negative 3%. And that's very compelling, to purchase hard assets such as real estate. And we're seeing obviously a growing investor base, which obviously the Bank of Canada has flagged more recently as well. So
I find it ironic that the Bank of Canada has flagged these investors as the culprits when, since the Bank of Canada began its quantitative easing program, mortgage lending to investors is up 100%, according to the Bank of Canada. So it's the money that the central bank is creating that these investors are using to make their investments. Do you find that ironic?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like I said, I think for every action there is a reaction, and I think that maybe it was well intentioned, but like I said, I think that the knock-on effects are certainly higher asset prices, and I know that we're now wondering why all these investors are active in the market. I mean, I can tell you, at least in terms of my clientele, we just look at it and say, okay, well, look at all the money going out the door. This is typically, historically speaking, very good for hard assets such as real estate, and that's certainly drawing more and more Canadians into the housing market. And, we're seeing, typically one of the big trends that we're seeing right now is normally what you do is you have a condo, for example, and you sell it and you upsize into a house. And so you'd sell one asset to buy the other asset. What we're seeing now, and very common, is is people will keep that existing rental, that condo, they'll convert it into a rental property, they'll refinance it, and then they'll go out and buy their house. So they're opting to keep multiple properties. And I think that's a result of the bull market that we've been in Canadian housing. I mean, home prices growing at 20+%. I mean, where else would you put your capital? And so again, there's certainly some.
It really is, and it's you mentioned that people want more space, but even condos are up by 15% in inner cities, so those prices are up as well. You point out that the wealth just keeps rolling over and over. The super rich, what they do is that they watch their asset price inflate, and then they borrow against that asset to buy another asset, which then inflates, and then they borrow against those assets to buy more, and it just multiplies and multiplies. They consume more and more of the available housing stock, and the real value of their debt goes down because inflation reduces its real worth. So this inflationary economy is wonderful for the ultra-rich investor class, even if it is terrible for working class renters. Would you agree with that, Mr. Saretsky?
We're now moving to. Thank you. We're moving to the Liberals for 5 minutes, and we have Madame Chatel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chair, I have a question for Mrs. Guinel from the Hotel Association. As you know, labor shortage is important for all of us in this room. My own riding as a rural community, and in some part, for example, in Maniwaki, there's only 2 main hotels. When we talk about labor shortage earlier in this sector in particular, I wondered what you think of those statistics. Statistic Canada has showed that the population in age of working, so 24 to 64, over the last 10 years have grew by 8%, while the population of 65% and more have grown by 42.3%. At the same time, as my colleague mentioned, we have an issue with immigration. So to me, the bigger problem with labor shortage is really the aging of our population. And I just want to confirm that you have also seen that trend.
Yes, that trend is accurate, and I have seen that also from Statistics Canada. Statistics Canada also has another interesting stat, which suggests that 80% of Canada's future workforce needs to come from immigration. And so we will be putting a proposal to government for how we build back out of this crisis, particularly as it relates to these hardest hit sectors. And it is our hope that there will be some urgency applied to allowing more workers into this country at all skill levels, and most immediately fixing some of the blockages that exist today as it relates to working applications that have been paused because of COVID. We are planning now for the summer. We are trying to get international students into this country. We have a working holiday visa. Those applications have been paused. We need to unlock some of the existing systems to allow us to get as many workers as we can for this summer. But we also need to deal with some systemic issues around affordability and the fact that we have, housekeepers that are commuting 3 hours a day back and forth because they can't afford to live in the city within which they work. And obviously those are more longer term issues.
Yeah, it's a really big issue and integrated. So conclusion, it's the CERB is not the main issue here. One other question about labor shortage and the importance of passing this bill. As you mentioned, if we don't pass this bill, what will happen is that on the wage subsidy, the employer-employee relationship will be broken in time at the time where the season, as you said so passionately and hopefully, will pick up in the summer. And so the consequence on labor shortage, if you break those relationships that you have struggled to maintain, will be huge. So if we really care about labor shortage, we should pass this bill. Just want to confirm this.
Absolutely. We need to keep the businesses intact, and we need to maintain as many of those employer relationships, because if we don't have our employees by the time we need to recover, then we will not be in a position to recover. So we need both. They go hand in hand, and this bill is absolutely critical to making that happen.
And if we don't make that happen and the season comes, it will be a cascading effect in the sense that tourism is such a big sector for our economy. We'll be in pretty poor shape if we don't pass this bill, as I understand it.
That is correct.
Excellent. I have, Chair, if I have more time.
40 seconds.
I have a quick question for Madame Préjean. Madame Préjean, la fondation.
Ms. Préjean, the foundation that you spoke of, the money came from Quebec. Why did the government of Quebec stop funding this foundation? Well, from what I understood, there were my colleague would be a better position to answer about the discretionary funds, but this fund belonged to her, and she's the one who decided to inject $2 million into the foundation to begin with, and then $3 million. So after the first $2 million were spent, and that went pretty quickly, when the forms were available on the foundation's website, we had to remove the form because we knew that the $2 million were already spent. So a second amount of $3 million was received, and it took 6 weeks to go through that.
That's your time. And now we are moving over to the Conservatives, and it's Mr. Chambers, yes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
For 5 minutes, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually, like some of my colleagues in here as well, my riding is significantly home to many of Canada's premier tourism destinations, as we like to say, Georgian Bay, lots of Great Lakes. I have a number of, I think, your members in my riding, Ms. Greinol, on the Hotel Association, or those that are, in the same industry. I have heard a lot of feedback on labor shortage, which I agree is acute. One of the things, though, I have heard feedback is some challenges with mixed messaging from government on travel and promoting travel, and some challenges with PCR tests at the airport, and that is also affecting people's willingness to kind of recover and come back to the tourism market. Would you like to comment on maybe some of the challenges from the government policy side?
Yes, I mean, Canada is not really open for business today. It is very difficult to get into Canada. The PCR test is a barrier, and of course now we've got talk of more restrictions coming into place. I want to be clear, though, like we are all sensitive to the fact that this is a health crisis, and that we do have a variant out there, and we are all trying to understand what this variant means, how transmissible it is, and what it will mean in terms of its relationship to vaccine effectiveness. And so, what we ask of government moving forward is that as we understand these health implications, that we are clear with Canadians, that we have, and international travelers, that we have a clear and predictable situation at the border, so that those people that do need to travel, whether it's for leisure or it's for business, that there is a clear understanding of what is going to happen at the border. And eventually, once we learn to live with this virus, that we've got a process that is not as clunky as it is today. We desperately need a wide open travel climate in this country if our industry is going to come back by this summer. Otherwise, the collapse that I speak of will be inevitable.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Mr. Soretsky, I think appreciate your expertise on the real estate sector. We've spent a lot of time talking about affordable housing in the last few days, and we had some time with the Minister of Finance earlier this morning. We've tried a lot of things to deal with affordability crisis. I think you're in the West Coast, vacant homes tax, a speculation tax, banning foreign buyers. But some of the underlying fundamentals of the lending market have remained consistent, and that is, low interest rates. In your opinion, what is it going to take that's going to, affect the housing market most specifically, and what are the risks that are growing in that market by the current structure?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think that so long as interest rates are where they're at and mortgage rates are where they're at, you're going to continue to have a larger and larger inflow of capital into that housing market. It's just what it is. So long as rates stay low, solutions I'm looking at and saying, okay, well, yeah, we've tried, I'm in Vancouver, right? So empty homes tax, we've tried a speculation tax, we've tried an Airbnb ban, we've tried everything. I think one of the biggest barriers, I would say, if you're not going to raise interest rates, then the biggest thing I can say that we can try to tackle is ultimately more housing supply. And the big challenge really is at the municipal level is the amount of red tape, the length it takes to get a project approved and get homes built is simply way too long.
Thank you. Just Mr. Chair?
50 seconds.
50?
50.
15?
Yes. 50. Well, almost a minute. Yeah.
Thank you. Our quick one for Ms. Kobliak. Were you consulted, or was your organization consulted in the development of C2? Or have you had any recent conversations with the government about the challenges that some of your members are facing?
Not directly with the government, no.
Thank you.
We were not consulted. We wish we would have been.
Are you done, Mr. Chambers? Yeah, okay, thank you. We are moving now to the Liberals, and we have Mr. McDonald for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I want to talk to Mrs. Grinwell again on, I just wonder how many employees are represented by the Hotel Association of Canada?
300,000.
And approximately how many of those were, that you know of, would have been let go during COVID-19?
So 60% of our workforce was lost in those early months when we had a total shutdown. We have been trying to hire back as many of those people as possible, but it is unclear in this environment today how many have been lost permanently. We do know that many have transferred over to the health sector and will not be coming back.
So do you track the numbers of the rehires, I guess? Most of those people obviously would have went on CERB, I would assume. But the employment rose 154,000 people in November. Do you have any numbers relevant to how many of those people went back into the service sector that you represent?
I do have those numbers. And what I'd like to do is follow up with the committee, if I can, on the very specifics of which percentage was hired back into our sector. But what I can tell you is that we did not see the kind of recovery we needed to see. We did not get to hire back as many workers as we needed to. Part of that was because of CERB, but that was not the whole reason. There is. Fundamentally, we have become a destabilized industry, and many of our workers have moved on. And on top of that, we have an industry that has in many regions of the country did not see the kind of demand that we needed to see to hire back as many workers as possible. So the numbers that you're referring to mostly apply to other sectors, but I will get you the specifics on our sector in particular.
Did your Hotel Association of Canada do any surveys or research on regionality and how COVID-19 is there areas that were more hit harder than other areas? I come from a rural area, and I'm just wondering if there's any information that you can provide us on where the most hardest hit areas of the Hotel Association of Canada, the tourism industry, were represented.
The downtown cores were disproportionately hard hit. The rurals, across the board, revenues were down between 50 and 100% over the course of COVID up until the last couple of months. And so it is across the board, but there is an acute challenge in the urban cores where this summer we did not have events or fairs or festivals or any of what drives people to the downtown cores. People aren't working in those downtown cores. They have been devastated, and I would be very happy to follow up with you. We have every single market for every single week, and we can do an analysis on rural versus urban for every market.
And your international, so there, obviously we can't depend for much longer on domestic travel. We need international travel. The new variant obviously is put an impediment in the way of that. But if your sector doesn't get C2 passed, I mean, I know there's hotels right downtown Ottawa that are huge hotels, nice hotels that don't have their restaurants open. And I'm sure some people in this room are likely staying at least one of them. I'm just wondering what alternative is out there? Like, what is the doom and gloom if this doesn't get passed?
Well, we'll see a collapse in this sector where using the hotel sector as an example here, we will see, according to that survey, we could see up to 60% of the hotels in this country close permanently. They will not be able to cover the bills. They are running a loss every single month in most regions in this country and in most segments in this country. And this bill will provide support for them to pay a portion of their fixed costs and a portion of their wages, which is the lifeline that the industry needs to get through the next couple of months. Without it, we will see significant business closures, possibly up to 60%.
Thank you, and that's your time, Mr. McDonald. Now we'll move over to the bloc and Madame Sinclair Desganay.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to hear a bit more from Ms. Préjean. Hello, Ms. Préjean. This morning, we received Madam Minister Freeland. She came to speak to us here in the committee, and she mentioned that C2 had programming for the cultural sector and had a sector for culture under the tourism and hospitality sector, because the tourism and hospitality sector is a broad one, you see. Do you believe, Ms. Préjean, that this will cover most of the members of the Union des Artistes and freelance workers in the arts as well? There are a number of artists who are not members of any association. These are the most vulnerable, those who haven't an RSP, no insurance of any sort. The foundation, though, that we have is helpful because we can reach everyone with equal and fair coverage for all. But those who aren't members of any association, those are the ones who are the most vulnerable. To my mind, that's my opinion. The worst thing that could happen would be that those funds would not go through the associations and unions. I don't see how entrepreneurs, how business owners could reach out to members of arts groups, especially if they're not members of an official group, if they're freelancers. There'd be no way to reach them. Thank you. Follow-up question. You gave us some figures that were of the highest interest to us and also very sad, speaking of people who are thinking of giving up on their careers. Could you give us more, provide us some examples, and tell us what this will do to culture in Canada? Unfortunately, cases of people who will be leaving the sector, I can't tell you much about them, and you won't be able to say anything either because you'll just never hear about it. Also, I don't like to speak of specific cases, but we can think of artists who have been able to write, to sing, and to have reached deeply into our hearts. If they had never existed, then that would have been absent from our culture. An artist who doesn't work takes more than just their lives from our history.
Blakey.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Préjean.
Thank you very much.
Demandez comme nous avons.
Madame Préjean, here's my question. We have a tool within Bill C2. The Canadian Worker Lockdown Benefit, which is not for freelance workers in the arts and culture sector per se, unless a lockdown were to occur. But we do have all the sectors which the government does feel require special help, exceptional assistance at this time, listed in the first part of the bill. And I'm wondering whether it would make sense to simply give access to the CWLB benefits, Canadian Worker Lockdown Benefits, to arts and culture workers, even if there were no lockdown in their region, given that we accept that this is a sector which, lockdown or no lockdown, is in great distress. Do you think that would have been a solution that the government might have come up with? Well, I'd have to study that. I haven't thought of it in this way, but I can give you another response rather than giving you sort of a general idea. The sort of thing I would like to study in depth. You know, I have thought of something like that. I've heard that before, but let me study it further. Nevertheless, I can tell you something about that if I can get back to you. Yes, that would be wonderful. If you could give us a detailed response, it might be very useful. Please provide it to the members of the committee. With pleasure, yes.
5 seconds.
Well, Ms. Koblik, if I could, just for the 45 seconds I have, go back to you. I know you were cut off in your last answer, so if you want to share some of those reflections. I give about 30 seconds.
I have 30 seconds to say that I've heard during this committee that we're talking about hotels and investments. And I just want to press that there's a whole group of people in this country, across this country, who, when these benefits are clawed back, they are losing their homes. They are not in the luxury of traveling. They are really at a completely different situation during this pandemic. And we're just forgetting them. They're not in this bill. They have lost their recovery benefits. They have had clawbacks. They can't wait. And with every month that goes by, we're going to see that there's less food security, less health security, less housing security. And I would ask the members, what are they going to put in this bill to assure that this doesn't happen, that we have another roll-off catastrophe that will go on for months to come and years?
Thank you, Ms. Koblik. Thank you. We are moving to the Conservatives now for 5 minutes. I've got Mr. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back to Mrs. Grenol again. Have you experienced any wage inflation amongst the people who have to come in and supply the services at your organization's hotels?
I don't know if I would call it wage inflation. Wage inflation is part of it, but we've experienced inflation all across the board. Insurance costs have, in some cases, gone up by up to 400%. We have been affected by the supply chain, so getting materials into the hotels and food prices, et cetera. So there has been an increase in costs across the board, including wage inflation as well.
Okay, thank you. Any issues on the inflation and availability of labor versus the fixed costs?
Sure, I understand the question.
Any concerns with availability of labor?
We're deeply concerned with the availability of labor in this country, and desperately, we're in this middle ground right now where we don't have enough demand to be attracting and rehiring as many people as we possibly can. So we're trying to hang on to as many employees. Those employees are with us, and the point of this bill is to try and maintain the employee-employer connection. So they would already be on payroll with us. Those would be long-standing relationships. And our goal is to maintain those employees. But as it relates to rehiring, as we get into the spring and summer periods, there will be an increase in wage inflation at that time when we get into the true rehiring period.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Grinnell. Mr. Soretsky, can you give us an estimation of the percentage of properties that have been sold that are sold as investment properties now? A percentage, please.
I mean, I think it's hard to figure out what that percentage is. I mean, all I can say is I work in the inner city here of Vancouver, and I mean, 50% of that is investor investor-owned units. So,
50, sorry, 50%?
50% in the inner city. If you're talking about condos, I think it's close to that number. Yeah.
Thank you.
Downtown Vancouver, I think is 60% renters.
Okay, thank you very much. Give us some perspective on why you think Canada's housing prices have increased at a level so much higher than the U.S. has increased.
I think really a huge thing is one, we haven't been building enough. Number two is we certainly have, a lot of immigration in our country. And number three, I think the bank lending is a big thing. I think that there's been a lot of credit growth. And if you look at, all you have to do is look at household indebtedness in Canada, right? So that basically tells me that people are taking on a lot of debt. And that most of that debt is in the form of mortgages. So the banks are obviously lending.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So it's low interest rates that are causing a lot of this. These low interest rates are non-market mechanisms right now because of the Bank of Canada's policies of keeping interest rates low with quantitative easing. What would happen once we return to a market mechanism for setting interest rates if those mortgage interest payments increase, as they surely will? What will happen to both the payments that are due from the home buyers plus the actual ownership of those units? Will they switch over to investors even more?
Yeah, you'll have a substantial repricing in home prices. So if mortgage rates rise, I need to remind people sometimes that in 2018, mortgage rates in Canada hit 3.5%. Everybody thought they were going to go to 4%. During that year in 2018, Greater Vancouver home sales dropped to an 18-year low, and in Greater Toronto area, they dropped to a decade low. And so if we get any sort of repricing in the mortgage market, what you will see is you'll see a repricing in home prices. So for example, in 2018, Vancouver home prices dropped about 10% as a result. And then same time, what you will see is you'll see more investors, I think, hitting the sell button. For sure, you will see that, and that will obviously add to supply on market and probably weigh on prices as well.
Thank you very much. Final question here from Mrs. Colebrook. Ms. Colebrook, some of these programs that the government has put out have been rather haphazard, and I'm speaking directly to the $500 that was given as a gift in recognition of what was happening in times to people 75 and over. Unfortunately, that caused some other effects because there are all kinds of follow-on implications, including rental payments, which in some lower income seniors is a portion of your income. And I noticed you mentioned that as well, as far as the social programs were available to seniors below a certain level. How many seniors are affected by these haphazard programs that the government has put forward?
Mr. McLean, great question, although may have to wait till we get into just our final round. I've got Ms. Sarowitz is up next for the Liberals for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thanks to everyone for, I think, this important conversation this afternoon. My first question is to Ms. Dobaluk from the Income Security Advocacy Center. As I was hearing your exchange with my colleague, Mr. Blakey, earlier, I just wanted to reiterate a couple of the things that our Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance have indicated this morning. I think there is a very there was a very clear commitment made by our Deputy Prime Minister that we're working on the GIS CERB issue, that we're aware of the issue, that we're concerned about it, that it's a priority, and to stay tuned for some news. And so I just wanted to make sure that was reiterated, just because I think that there's a lot of compassion from all sides of the floor on the issue. I think the other point I want to make is just around the audits around CERB. And the CRA is actually coming before this committee tomorrow, so I think that the committee members can actually ask more specific questions then. But I know that the CRA and Service Canada have made it very clear that when they're doing their audits, they are flexible, they're empathetic, they're compassionate, and they are not out in any way to try to harass our vulnerable Canadians to repay money that they're not able to do so. And so how that emanates for me in my writing is originally when there was a concern, particularly from some of my artists, to be honest, around the auditing of the CERB benefits, I had a lot of calls to my office. I will say to you, a number of them have been audited, and I'll say to you that I literally receive 0 calls right now about the auditing around CERB and any of their concerns. So it's gone from a bit of a crescendo around emails and calls to literally 0 right now. And so for me in my writing, I have a working class writing. It's definitely something I'm always concerned about in terms of how the people in my writing are being treated. And so I did want to relay that to you. My question to you, though, and this is something I brought up to our Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance this morning, is the importance of national childcare. And I wonder if you could maybe comment on the importance of the Ontario government signing on to the childcare plan.
Sorry, I just would like to first address some of your comments. I did watch the minister this morning, and we are very glad that it's on the radar. We've been working on our advocacy since August. But I've also kind of traced some of the comments from this government. And what I've heard Minister Qualtrough say is that they have to look at fairness and equity. And I put that in my statement that let's talk about which seniors we're talking about. These are the poorest seniors who are living near or around poverty line. These are not OAS receiving seniors who did not receive a clawback until they hit 80,000. These are the seniors who once they get $1 of CERB, they are clawed back at 50%, and they are already on poverty line. So my fear is that what is going to be correct is we're going to have a one-time payment, and that's what I meant by we need it to be systemically addressed. And there's an easy way to fix this.
Look, I'm very sorry. I do want to ask you about the childcare question, just because I only have a limited time to ask all my questions.
Just a quick point of order on that.
We need a minister exemption.
Point of order.
We need a minister exemption on earnings for CERB for seniors.
Point of order. Yes.
Just a quick point of order. I know, earlier today we had a long conversation about the right of witnesses to be able to answer questions to their own satisfaction.
I didn't ask a question about that.
Well, you did make a number of comments about it.
I know, but I didn't ask a question on it.
I know, but
I asked about childcare.
So I'll allow the member
this was part of the conversation
to continue
today.
and the witness to answer. So, Ms. Zarowitz?
So I asked a question around childcare and the importance of the Ontario government signing on to it. So that was my question.
And in the income security, we work for low-income Ontarians. And so children are poor if their parents are poor, and there are seniors who are also taking care of grandchildren. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention some of those comments, because until we see something, we're going to continue to feel the urgency. Seniors cannot wait every day that they do not have that GIS restored. There's increased risk of homelessness, and we are very strongly urging the government to put something into this bill to address that. And I would also let you know that some people are not coming forward to your office potentially.
I'm just not going to get an answer to my question. So thanks very much.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Zarowitz. We are, so members, we are coming close to the end of our time. We're going to do a final kind of truncated round. Each party is going to have 2 minutes. We're going to start with the Conservatives and for 2 minutes. And it'll be Mr. Chambers.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions, hopefully fairly quick from Mr. Saretsky. Do you think that Canadians are addicted to debt?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so far gone now, unfortunately.
Thank you. I'd actually yield the rest of my time on the floor to Mrs. Kobluk to finish a more fulsome explanation on the exchange that she just had with Ms. Zarowitz. My apologies.
Sorry, can you maybe direct me specifically as to what you want to hear?
Well, we were talking about low-income seniors and those who are most vulnerable, and I just wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to advocate on their behalf.
Well, look, I think childcare is very important. There's no doubt about it, but we are here because we want the fix for the GIS clawback. And obviously, Isaac supports all wraparound services. That includes housing, childcare, mental health and addiction services. We advocate for that frequently. We also advocate for workers' rights, and racialized workers have been very hard hit during this pandemic. But I don't think, to respond to some of the comments from your colleague, we're happy it's on the radar, but we are not feeling allayed yet in our concerns until we actually see a proposal on the table that shows that the minister will exempt CERB for the 2020 fiscal year so that people are not losing their GIS for the duration of the year. And this is going to continue with CRB. So let's fix it now, because you guys will be here in committee next year. And if I'm lucky enough to come back and speak, I will be saying similar things, and it will be more urgent, because with every day that the money is not there, the situation is harder for them.
Thank you for coming this afternoon.
Chambers, we are moving to the Liberals for 2 minutes. Mr. Baker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to direct my question to Ms. Greinel again. And I think one of the things we've spoken a lot about the importance of the measures in C2 for your sector. I think you've articulated that quite clearly. But one of the conversations that has come up on the committee on a number of occasions is the suggestion by some that, well, the programs here are helping businesses, but they're not helping people, like workers. And I guess what I would ask you is, can you speak to the impact that these measures would have on Canadian workers? And in my view, quickly, if I can, is, to my mind, the reason for these measures is to help businesses prevent all the negative outcomes that you've spoken about, the bankruptcies and the cutbacks and everything else that you've spoken about. But by keeping businesses functioning and operational, that allows them to then pay workers. By subsidizing wages, we allow them to pay workers. Can you speak to what the impact would be of the measures in C2, in your view, on Canadian workers?
Well, if there are no businesses, then there are no jobs. So, they go hand in hand. And so this bill not only keeps the businesses intact, but it provides for a subsidy for employment, which will allow us to maintain as many of our workers as possible over this winter season, so that they are with us in our time for recovery. They are the lifeblood of this industry. They are the most important asset that we have. And so without this support, we will not only will we not have the businesses, we will not have the jobs. And with this support, we can maintain as many of them as humanly possible.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Baker. Now we're moving over to the Bloc and Madame Sinclair Desganay.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Once again, I have a question for you, Ms. Préjean. It's quite simple. Were you consulted, either through the Union des Artistes or the Foundation? Were you consulted anywhere regarding this bill, Bill C2? Yes, we were consulted a few times. There was a change of... And we were consulted before the elections and then after the elections. So all that to say, yes, we were consulted. And do you feel that the concerns that you brought up were taken into consideration? Yes. Our government is sensitive to these issues, and this link is very important. It's very important for us to have to be able to communicate with the government. It's very important. Okay, I understand. So CRB finished on October 23rd. The government went into elections. Then the government came to sit again 2 months after the elections. The bill was written. You were consulted, but throughout all of that, as you have mentioned, many artists, especially freelancers in the area of culture, they were forgotten in this bill. An example, in Terrebonne, in my writing, we had the Théâtre du Vieux Terrebonne, so a theater that used to be always full. Now it's only 1/3 full. And there's nothing here for culture in this bill. However, you have said, you've already said, we needed a program yesterday. So what we really want to hear is that we need a program urgently. And currently, the current offering is not sufficient, and we need a more specific timeline. Inaudible.
The NDP and Mr. Blakey, this will be the last questions.
Thank you. I'll start maybe just by correcting what I would call a mischaracterization, however unintentional, I'm sure, of some of what I've had to say by Mr. Baker anyway. It's not that there's no support for any workers at all. It's that there's no support for self-employed workers. So to Ms. Grinnell, I mean, it may well be in the Hotel Association that normally people who run hotels do have some employees. But surely, whether it's travel agents or various tourism agents, you do work with people who are self-employed in your industry. as part of the larger industry. And I'm just wondering, the extent to which you think that, that those folks who work for themselves and should also, given the state that the industry is in, be able to receive some kind of financial help. That's not going to come through a wage subsidy program, so I think it stands to reason there has to be another mechanism. Do you have some thoughts on that for the committee?
Do you think there's an opportunity for improvement in that respect? There are independent operators, independent contractors within this sector for sure, and they have not been immune to the deep devastation. And so, it doesn't apply directly to the Hotel Association, who I represent, but wearing my the coalition chair of the hardest hit businesses, we do have businesses in there that have independent contractors, and they are concerned about that piece.
Very much.
15 seconds, so I think we're going to wrap up now. I just want to say on behalf of all the members of Standing Committee on Finance, we want to thank the witnesses. Thank you for your testimony, for your answers to the questions, for informing this committee on this important piece of legislation, C2. So we thank you very much for all of that. And at this time, members, we are going to adjourn. So thank you. Thank you.